All right, I'll call the meeting to order. Posted properly.
It has been posted according to open meeting
All
laws.
right, roll call.
President Johnson.
Here.
Trustee Renucci. Here. Commissioner Hayes. Here. Commissioner Morath. Here. Commissioner Seeger. Here. Commissioner Letterhouse.
Here.
Commissioner Harding.
Here. Okay, I'm going to read off the stuff for citizen participation. We do have a public hearing. If you are here to comment on that agenda item, you may do so at citizen participation or at the public hearing. It's probably easier at the public hearing, and we can actually have more of a dialogue then. But anything else? So per Village Resolution 2017-01, anyone wishing to address the Plan Commission during citizen participation will be allowed 5 minutes. Your subject must specifically relate to matters under the jurisdiction of the Plan Commission, whether on the agenda or not. The Plan Commission should not engage in a discussion regarding comments because it was not part of the publicly noticed agenda. Upon conclusion of the citizen participation segment, members of the audience are not allowed further comment unless they're participating in a public hearing or specifically allowed by a majority vote of the Plan Commission due to involvement in an agenda item. Now that I read that mouthful, going once, going twice. Okay, I will close citizen participation. We'll move on to approval of minutes from December 9th, 2024.
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes as presented.
I'll abstain from voting.
Okay. Any questions, discussion, or corrections? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries with Jacob as abstained. All right, we'll move on to ordinances and code amendments. Item 1, amend the general development plan for 2931 Union Street Planned Development District for the property located at 2931 Union Street to allow office and/or personal or professional services in the portion of the church/school building that was previously a parochial school and add a multi-tenant monument sign. Steve Lambrex, applicant, application 2024-17. So what I'll do is I'll open the public hearing. I'll have Orrin, our zoning administrator, kind of walk us through the application and his memo. Steve, maybe have you come up and talk about whatever you've got on your mind, and then we'll take questions from the commissioners and from the audience. Okay? So, Orrin, all yours. Oh, I'm sorry. One clarification. Thank you.
I just wanted to make the Plan Commission aware that for public hearings, we are legally required to publish a notice in the newspaper, which was done. The village ordinance also requires us to send a notice to property owners within 300 feet of the boundary of the property, and that was not done. The ordinance does say failure to mail said notice, provided that it is unintentional, shall not invalidate proceedings under this section. But for the Plan Commission's consideration, there is an option to adjourn the public hearing to a later date. After you hear comments tonight, it does not require anybody to come back and make the same comments because they will be part of the minutes the village board receives. They certainly are welcome to come back, but if the board is inclined, you could do that to allow us some time to send those property owners that notice. They have gotten that notice for prior hearings on this property.
Orrin?
So this is a proposal for an amendment to the 2931 Union Street Planned Development District. This is the general development plan that we're looking at amending. If you recall from past plan development districts, it's a three-step process. There's usually a concept review first, then the general development plan, which kind of sets forth the framework for the PDD, and then the final development plan, which is all of the details and like the final site plan approval for the plan development district. So the reason we're looking at the general development plan is that there's a proposal to add a new use. Most recently, back in 2023, I believe, there was an amendment whereby the use of the former sanctuary of the church portion of the building was amended to allow retail. So that was the last time maybe that you all saw this project before you. In this instance, the proposal is to allow a new use, which would be personal or professional services within the school portion of the building. The current approval as it is on the books only allows office use in that portion of the building. And so we did the public hearing notice, which is required. These types of proposals, the general development plan per the code is prescribed to be treated like a rezoning essentially. The overall comments that I have, the personal and professional services, I just kind of give an overview of what that land use definition is in the code and what the particular requirements are for that in other portions of the village. The Plan Commission should determine whether all the uses referenced within that are something that they want to allow in this situation. I'm recommending a few of those things be excluded if you do want to approve this type of land use at this location. Some of the things that are mentioned within the land use as examples that I don't think would fit great with this particular location would be hospitals, medical offices, and veterinary clinics. And so I think the other uses would go well. The reason I don't suggest including those would be that they have higher parking demands based on the needs of those uses. There's usually more people there at one time. And with this particular plan development, there isn't any on-site parking, and so that was the rationale for that. The next thing I wanted to touch on is the topic of parking. So the building is situated on a lot. They never really had any on-site parking. Back in 2023, again, there was as part of the final development plan, there were a couple spaces shown at the front of the building. Having spoken with the property owner, it sounds like those haven't been installed, but it was only 2 spaces. I think it was intended that would be for the retail user for the former sanctuary space. So otherwise, this site is reliant upon on-street parking to meet its needs, which is kind of the intent for the downtown area of the village, that would be permissible. The way that the PDD was set up originally, it specifically addresses parking, and it basically says that it's not required. So it says on-site parking for uses permitted in the church/school building is not required. That's within the permissible uses language within the PDD currently. So when we're thinking about adding another use, we should think about whether or not that statement still holds true. Is the Plan Commission still comfortable if we add this new use with there not being any off-street parking for this particular development? And so, again, I've acknowledged what the prescription is in other areas for those particular types of uses. And for the personal services and professional offices, it's offices, 1 space per 300 square feet, and other uses, 1 space for every 3 persons at a maximum capacity of the establishment. So it kind of gets at what the occupancy of that particular space might be. The other aspect of this, we have a general sign plan from the petitioner who would like to add a multi-tenant sign just to acknowledge all of the tenants that might be in the building. It's a monument-style sign that would be on the east side of the building. It is, that plan with some specs is in your packet. Thank you for bringing that up. This again is just a general plan. This would still be subject to going through the approval process, but the general development plan asks that this information be provided at this stage. So the way that these work, the Plan Commission is advisory, so you'll be making a recommendation to the village board, who has final approval or denial authority over this type of application. Again, the public hearing notice did go out, a Class 2 notice that was published. The overall recommendations from staff are, again, we have our normal conditions that you're used to seeing, but we haven't added one regarding hospitals, medical offices, and clinics, and veterinary clinics being prohibited. And the last thing that I wanted to bring to your attention was just that this did come to the village's attention via a complaint about street parking. And so we didn't know that that there was a salon business that was operating out of the school portion of the building, and that there was a complaint received about a lack of street parking due to that use. And the hair salon is there without permits or approvals from the village currently. Obviously, if this particular land use was approved within the PDD, then they would be able to get such an approval and get an occupancy and make right. But it would require this amendment. Otherwise, if the language stands as it is, and it only allows offices, then that particular use wouldn't be allowed within this planned development district. So that's my summary. The petitioner is present in the audience if there are specific questions from the Plan Commission for him.
Steve, do you want to come up and talk about? Just push the little people icon there.
Okay. So, yeah. So, Oren pretty well summed it up. I guess a little bit ignorant. Had we known that there's a differentiation between office and personal professional services, we probably would have asked for that at the beginning. But we've had, it was mainly offices that have been in there for now, and then we've had people come to ask us, Sarah, one for hair, and we did not know that we needed a different category to do that. So we made the mistake of telling her that it was fine, go ahead, and she's been operating in there for a month plus, hoping that the board would, or the Plan Commission, I should say, would approve this change. So we've had trouble filling the building with just office space. So the personal professional services would open up some more office spaces for use. And I absolutely agree that we would not want any hospital-type stuff. We would not want any veterinarian. It's not even under consideration. We did someone proposed to us about having dog training in that building. We said absolutely not. So we're pretty strict on who we would let in there. And the personal professional services, parking is a consideration. We have talked to the people that are in the building as far as offices, as far as personal professional services that are operating now, to park on the other side of the street, to leave the 5 or 6 spaces on the west side of Clark available to that building. Because that was, the one complaint we had was from one of our own tenants, honestly, because there were people working in the building, getting things set up and organized, and he had trouble getting his clients into that building. So that's where that complaint, why he would complain against his own landlord, I don't know, but he did. So that's why the parking was an issue. And as far as addressing the 2 spots that we had designed in the front of the building, we started thinking about it, and if we took and made 2 spots in the front of the building, we are actually losing a spot on the street, which would be available to the residents all day long, right? And on the weekends and all that. And since then, the post office has told us we needed to put up mailboxes for all the other tenants, individual mailboxes. And the spot that they wanted them put blocks access to that parking area. So the minimal gain of essentially 1 parking space, because you lose the one on the street, did not seem worth it. And we lose green space as well. So I think the parking is way less now on that area than it was when it was an operating school with hundreds of kids and teachers, and when there was an operating church that had funerals and weddings and all that, and hundreds of parishioners there on a daily or at least weekly basis. I think Sarah's going to come up and talk and tell you how many customers she has in a day, whether that's 4, spread out over the day over a couple hours each. The parking implications, I think, are minimal for the neighborhood. Most of that is during the day when people are either at work or not home. There's evening hours. I don't know if you had any, but we've had no complaints from anybody regarding the Wilted Rose and their use of that property. They're closed on Sundays and Mondays. I think the impact to the neighborhood has been minimal. Nothing but positive on that. So happy to answer any other questions somebody might have.
Questions from the commission before we take comments from the public?
Wrong button. All right, so I guess my concern is years ago when you came in front of this board and you bought this place and the plan was to put offices in it. And at that time, we were concerned about parking. And we passed it. And then you came back last year, or the year before, whatever it was, and you wanted to put a business in there now. Now, I voted no against that because I knew parking would be an issue with it. Now you're coming back a third time wanting to change everything again. So I think parking is just going to get worse and worse in that area. And how many times are you going to come back and change things?
Well, my comment to that would be right now we're approved for office space. And there's 11 offices in that building. So theoretically, we could have 11 cars parked on that street all day long, every day. We're not having anywhere near that. If you go by there on a normal day, there might be 3 right now with what's going on. And that's even with Sarah operating in there. So I think we have cut down on this would actually reduce the need for parking because the people that are coming in are not coming in the office and staying there all day. They're coming in for a scheduled appointment. There's no walk-ins. You're scheduling your appointment. It might be at 9 o'clock and you're done at 11 and that car's gone and the next car shows up at 11 and is thereby gone by 1 and that type of thing. So that's my answer to that.
I'm not trying to defend Steve in any way on this one, but what is the mic? It's on. The green thing is. Okay. Now you can hear me? Okay. So not to defend Steve, but identifying what is on that block. The building itself takes up probably the majority of the entire road. So maybe the majority of the road surface area in front there would be necessarily designated to be part of parking for that building. There is no residence that has front facing on that road. The opposite side of the street is another business. There's a back garage area for the back side of one home on the opposing corner. So the majority of everything that's in that area is either industrial or taken up by the building itself because of the size of what it is for the entire street. So I don't personally see parking being an issue. If it does become an issue, I think there's another thing we can address that's a wider street than any of the other side streets in the community. In our famous square, we've got angled parking. Maybe there's a way to accommodate that with that wider street surface area there. That'd be a future consideration of sorts that could maybe happen in front of the board on any kind of future development. But I fully agree with the fact that this was a school at one time, a fully operational church that had plenty of traffic and cars in the area. And I'm sorry to hear that it was your own tenant that had to make this happen, but it's nice that we're now making it right. You know, having him come in front of us, we can do the right things. We can have it positioned the correct way. But as far as parking is concerned, in my opinion, just because of the amount of surface area alone that building takes up, that parking is almost designated to that space.
Oren, can I make a clarification? On that report, you had listed on there the main floor and the upper floor, but you did not mention the lower level.
That's the way the language is written in the original plan development district.
Okay.
It just references the first and second floors as far as where office was allowed in
Okay.
the school portion of the building.
Because we would, I mean, there is classrooms, old classrooms in the lower level that we would theoretically want to utilize as well. I did not see that on that.
You may want to, but it wasn't originally approved.
Okay.
And so that's something that would need an amendment as well. And that would likely, you'd have to come back and we'd have to look at whether or not that would just be a final development plan thing, and maybe it's something we can do as the final development plan for this, potentially, or is it something that would require another general plan review and another public hearing, unfortunately. So I can look at that a little deeper now that I know that.
Okay.
Okay, if there are no other questions at this time from the commission, I'll take comments from the public. So thanks, Steve. If you have any questions, comments about this item on the agenda, this is your time. Due to being a public hearing. It's a public hearing, and you are the public. Any questions or comments from the public on this item? But please come up. Yep. Just for our minutes, if you could, just state your name and address, please. Just push the little people icon, yeah.
Okay. I'm Annette Rohde. I own 3 businesses in this village. My concern is your comment about Steve coming back and changing his plan as the business changed, because obviously things are changing in our communities, that we plan to have these businesses, and it doesn't always work out that way. As a business owner, I want to see more companies come in. I want to see more business in our town. I've lived here my entire life. We need this here. I've never seen, my kids went to school there. I've never seen parking be an issue there. My question is, if you're concerned about Steve coming in and changing part of his business, is that not what we're looking for in our town? Is that, I mean, because adding a salon is bringing more business to our town, it's bringing people into our communities, bringing people to our square, that's gonna, utilize the restaurants, utilize, maybe see other things that we have in our town. I don't see I'm really confused as the parking being a hang-up, when it has been a church, it has been a school.
Well, I think the parking issue for me is the last time we dealt with this last year, they had a lot of neighbors coming in saying that parking was an issue. That's where I'm coming from. And if we were to proceed with this, since the neighbors didn't get the letter for this, I would say I would like to see the letter go out and have another public hearing I don't know if anyone is here for that, but to have them come and voice, because last time there was some that came and they were explaining the parking situation.
Thank you. Other questions or comments during the public hearing? Please come on up. So just push the little person icon, it'll turn green. There you go.
My name is Sarah Waymeyer, and I own Divine Hair Studio. I just want you guys to know that I was unaware that any of this was an issue. I was really excited about opening my business there and being a part of the community. I put myself in the newspaper, I joined the chamber, I was super pumped and excited. And then after about 3 weeks of being in there, all of this kind of started to come to a head. As far as the parking goes, we have not had an issue at all. My business is on the side of the church. There's no homes facing my business. If clients have had to park even on the square, they're fine walking literally a single block to get to my space. So it really hasn't been an issue. At first, it was a little rocky because me and my employees would park, sometimes we'd park on the side of where my business is, and then we just park across the street, or we park, across the street. So just trying to keep that space open for clients to park. Everybody loves it there. It's been a lot of good feedback from clients. A lot of women love going to the Wilted Rose to shop. They love going to the square for lunch after. Everybody has really been really positive about it, and I just think it would be a really great asset to the community, and what I still would like to offer there as well. I have some plans, and my really good friend Jess is going to be wanting to start a business for massage there, and I think we can all network together and have more of a full service type of salon, but still we can only have so many girls working at a time. It's not like I'm not a cost cutters, it's appointment only. It's not like we have, 10 different people coming in an hour. I only work 3 days behind the chair. Otherwise, I just have 2 other girls that work in my space. So technically, if it was a bunch of people there with offices, they could be having clients coming, like Steve said, more people coming every hour or employees staying there all day long with their cars, where we have a much more broken up schedule. And I think it's just a really good fit there, and I just really love the building, and I just wanted you guys to know it's not like we're there all day, every day. It's very broken up. I have 2 chairs available for hairdressers. One rents from me, and then the other one is my employee. So there's just 3 of us in there. So I don't know if you guys have any questions.
First, just say thanks for coming. And you answered one of my questions, because while we were going through this, I was looking on Google Maps, and somebody has posted pictures inside, and I don't know if that was you or somebody else, but I was going to ask you how many chairs, because I only saw 2 there. So-
Yeah, there's 4 chairs. And
There's
right
4,
now, there's
okay.
only 3. I'm a hairdresser, and then I have a renter, and then 1 employee. So there's 1 chair left available to rent, which I haven't wanted to promote until, obviously, I've spent a lot of money on this space, so for this to not happen now, it's a huge concern of mine now, because I've done a lot to this, and it scares me, so,
Well, thank you for coming in.
Okay.
And thanks for answering those questions.
thank you.
Other questions or comments during the public hearing from the audience? I think I would echo a bit of what Scott said, and I think to address some of the comments from the public hearing here, this is the type of business we want. I think, we got to unfortunately do things, I shouldn't say unfortunately, but we got to go through things the right way and get this approved. I think parking is a valid concern, but it sounds like from the data that we have right now, I don't see that is a problem or is a concern. I also think, though, that we need to properly notice this to the adjacent property owners. They do have a right to come and speak, and if they have a problem, then maybe we can find alternative solutions like Scott suggested or something else. So my recommendation here would be to adjourn the public hearing. We would not take a vote on this, and then we would have staff notice those individuals, and then we would take this back up at our next Plan Commission meeting, which I believe is the 7th of February. Is that right, Eileen? Or is the 10th? I'm sorry.
How does this adjournment affect the current business owner that's trying to conduct business in that building?
Staff became aware of this prior to this meeting, and direction to the staff was to continue to allow it until we go through this process. So I would say that would continue. It's not a table. It's just do you need a motion to adjourn this and hold it open? Okay.
We would like the motion to include the date and the public hearing in the future.
Okay, it is the 10th, sorry, yeah, okay. All right, then I will make a motion to adjourn the public hearing and hold over until the Plan Commission's meeting on February 10th at 6:30, and staff to provide notices to the property owners within 300 feet.
I'll second that.
Questions or discussion on the motion?
I just want to say one thing real quick. I'm not opposed to business. I admire anybody who starts a business, entrepreneurs. That's something I could never do. That takes boldness beyond boldness, and I applaud you guys for doing that, and I appreciate you. But as a commissioner here, I have to consider everything around it too. So I have to consider the buildings around it, their safety and your safety, and just to make sure everything goes together. So I'm not opposed to any business. I love business. I just want to make sure everything flows nicely.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Okay, we got a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, so the public hearing is adjourned until the February 10th date, and we will take that back up. Thanks for coming in. Your comments are on the record. Feel free to come back if you want to re-emphasize, but we just want to make sure that we don't have somebody come back and question a decision that was made here because something wasn't properly noticed, and that's our fault, not yours. Okay? All right, we'll move on to miscellaneous business. Item 1, Providence Farms preliminary plat in extraterritorial jurisdiction area, ETJ, located on Swoboda Road, part of the southeast quarter and southwest quarter of the southeast quarter and part of the southeast quarter of the southwest quarter of Section 31, Town 4 North, Range 18 East, Walworth County, Wisconsin, PET 3100007, William and Pamela Berkey, applicant, application 2024-18.
Sounds like they could raise quarter horses out there.
I don't know, was that an 8th or a 16th? Okay, so we have the memo here. This is an extraterritorial review. Anything you want to highlight, Orin? And this seems pretty straightforward.
No, I think it is pretty straightforward. The one thing I would point out is that not all of these lots will be served by the proposed private road. And so, one of the lots will have direct access to Swoboda. Another one will have a access easement off of that. That's the far east end. And then in the middle is where there'll be a private road that comes down and has a turnaround area. A couple of the lots will be off of that, but a couple more will be off of access easements to those other lots. And so there's a note in here that the county and town should both bless that and make sure it meets all their standards. The main thing for us, there weren't any public improvements that were prescribed in this area per the official map. And so as far as lot size, things like that, it's all meeting the standards for the zoning that it has.
Questions?
So road access at some point that would be lot 5, and 5 would be the biggest concern, is what you're saying? Orin?
1, 2, and 5 don't have direct access to either a public or private road. Those are the ones that are proposed to be on a access easement.
So
we have the applicant here.
William Berkey, 1020 Shorewood Drive, East Troy, and I'll answer the best I can. So
in the division of this land, I'm assuming that it's for development purposes, selling off the lands and building homes or something like that?
correct.
Every single one of those people that are on that area would want to have a road to get to their home and then a driveway possibly?
Yes.
Is there a plan for road access to all of these lots?
Yes, there is.
Because right now in the plan, it only shows the cul-de-sac that kind of comes in a little bit, but not really extending the entire length all the way to Lot 1 and 2, and then also no access truly to Lot 5. It's almost like it ended up being landlocked. It almost, 5 does.
There'll be an easement for the Lot 1, let me get the right lot up here. Easement for access to Lot 1 and actually Lot 2, the two far ends, straight off, so there'd be a shared drive to the two western lots, shared drive off of the end of the cul-de-sac for those two. Two houses being acceptable on one drive.
Okay.
And then on the east side, the Lot 5, the same situation there would be the easement to that one lot off of the road from the easement from Lot 6.
Okay.
So the two 5-acre lots will be sold off to the public. And the west side with the 4 larger lots, there's a 22-acre lot and 3 8-acre lots are just going to be sold to the family, our adult children and their families. and we would be using those lots there. So that's really a family that's building on that one side. The only thing that's going to be sold to the public are the 2 5-acre lots, like I talked about on the east side.
Lots 5 and 6.
That's number 5 and 6 lots would be, 5-acre lots, minimum requirement.
The only reason I ask this is because there's, an ordinance within the village that doesn't allow for landlocked areas. We require street access. It's not by way of a driveway easement like that. So it's just a matter of making sure that if there was any kind of, I know this is in the town, but
Right,
if there was any
I was
kind
gonna
of
say that, but yeah.
further development where that maybe would become village land at some point.
Right.
There's about a lot of land in this community that has come that way. We would want to have that happen. And this point and this juncture is kind of the time to really have those discussions about street access and how to have access to those areas. That's the only reason you're coming in front of us over it, because it's not even in our jurisdiction yet.
Right.
But it could be in the future.
Right, totally understood.
Orin, with that being said, is there any other any concern then? No. Okay.
And that would include, it looks like on the, reading the easement descriptions here, utilities, because my question was going to be, if it's in the village, then we extend water and sewer out there, the same easements would apply to provide water and sewer. Is that right?
The easement would run along that driveway, they had access to come in.
Right.
Okay. Other questions, comments?
I will make a motion to approve and recommend to the village board the approval of the preliminary plat for William H. Berkey and Pam Berkey for the proposed location on Swoboda Road, PET 3100007, subject to the following conditions in the packet 1 through 3.
Second.
Any questions or discussion? Anything? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thanks for coming in. Appreciate it. All right, moving on to item 2, amend the final development plan for Overlook Ridge Planned Development District to relocate the multifamily residential buildings further north towards Main Street on the property Sewall Development application 2024-19. And so discussion by the Plan Commission. Kevin is on Teams. He is remote. He decided that it was more important to go get married than appear in front of us. So I hope you're enjoying your trip, Kevin.
I am. We got back yesterday off of our cruise. So I'm pleased to report I've only gained 3 pounds.
Okay.
So that one in the record. So.
All right. So we've got a memo here from Orin. Orin, do you want to kind of run us through this? Because I think it's been a little while since Kevin's been before us on this, and kind of talk a little bit about what's changed and why Kevin's back here.
So this goes back to spring of 2024 when this was approved, when it was last before the Plan Commission. Again, that was for the final development plan. So of the 3-step process, we're on the 3rd part of that. So this is a proposed amendment to the final development plan. According to the developer, as they got deeper into doing soil borings in the area of the property where they originally got approval for the buildings, they found out the soils were in a lot worse condition than they had originally hoped. And so that necessitated them to propose this amendment to bring the buildings closer to the front of the property towards Main Street. So they're kind of flipping their layout. The parking will now be behind the buildings instead of the parking being in front of the buildings. The accessory building, instead of being in the front, will be in the back. The pool will be in between buildings 1 and 2 now. And so as far as the way the site balances out, again, I went back, we look at the general development plan. Are they still meeting those parameters that were spelled out in the general development plan? And the answer is yes, they are. The way that that was originally approved, they're still meeting those criteria. The number of units isn't changing, so the density isn't changing. The number of buildings isn't changing. It's just the details of the site plan layout that are being proposed to be different. The overall impact of this, you know, it is a four-story building, so it being closer to the street, there could be concerns over that at a staff level. I actually think that's a benefit, having it closer to the street. I prefer that. I think that's better overall for the village to have it address the street. As part of that discussion of the buildings moving, the fire department weighed in. They actually prefer this layout to the previous one because they have better access to the rear of the buildings now. The fire department did review the proposed fire department movement sheet that shows truck movements, and it shows locations for fire hydrants in the rear of the building. So Joe DeGaro did review and comment on that. The main comments in my staff review, because the building is now closer and addresses the street, I'm recommending that there be some kind of brick or stone treatment. What would probably make the most sense would be for that to be along the base of the building, where there's currently some gray siding proposed, a composite siding. That could either be a band that goes around the whole building, or maybe it doesn't come down on all parts. Maybe it's just certain portions that would make sense. So there's a recommended condition to that effect regarding adding, you know, providing revised architectural elevations that show those materials. The other thing that came up at a staff level while reviewing this was that there is only one access point on Main Street. The previous approval had two, but one of those went directly into an underground parking garage. So the thought was, could there be an emergency access point that is not utilized, but for something occurring where, you know, maybe there's an accident or something that blocks the main driveway? Could there be a secondary point of ingress and egress? And the thought was that where the water main comes in between the pool and building 2, perhaps that path to the parking lot could be utilized for something like that. And so the village engineer and the director of public works both thought that that was worth mentioning to the plan commission for discussion. The one issue that could raise pertains to the green space. So I just want to acknowledge that there would have to be a creative solution in looking at that, either balancing out by removing impervious surface somewhere else, or having a treatment that would allow an emergency access in that area that also would be permeable, you know, and not count against the green space. Because again, that would trigger, if the green space is going to go up, that would trigger this going back through the general development plan process and having a public hearing again, because that is one of the parameters that's spelled out in that general development plan. So aside from the building elevations and the access, I don't really have too much else to add. The conditions are mainly the same as they were when this was originally approved. I've tweaked a couple things to allow some flexibility on the back end of this, should other things need to move or shift, for staff to be able to review and approve things administratively regarding just the lighting and the parking, because if something changes, those are things that would have a ripple effect throughout the project. I don't have any particular issues with those as they stand right now. The overall process for this, again, the Plan Commission has the final approval authority over this. So this isn't a recommendation to somebody else. You all get to decide if you want to approve the amendment as proposed. The developer, my understanding is they're still working on the final engineering. It's pretty far along, but might not be done until end of the month, maybe early February. And so we don't have the final stormwater or civil plans to share with you tonight. So there's conditions addressing that for those to be reviewed and approved by the appropriate village staff when they're available. And obviously, anything that comes up with those would be subject to their comments.
Kevin, anything you want to add before we take questions?
Yeah, so actually Carl Sawyer is here with me today. He's actually the one who dug the test pits, and he's most likely the one that's going to be doing the earthwork on the project. I'm sure you guys are familiar with him. And then also Ryan Knox there as well, in person to represent us, and he's our Vice President of Construction. So just to kind of go talk about some of those points and a little bit about why we had to shift the buildings. So we dug some test pits and we found some incredibly rocky soils. Essentially, the project was not financially feasible, leaving those two buildings in that position. It just wasn't, the project was already tight as it is, and that just kind of tipped it right over the edge. That's not saying that moving these buildings is that much better. Because to be honest, there are still some bad soils that we're going to have to deal with under part of Building A. The parking lot is most likely, and I'm sure Carl can talk more about this as well, because he has a lot of experience in this, is probably going to require some sort of geogrid or something as well there. So that being said, the flipping these buildings isn't kind of this cure-all. Right now, this project is great. It's still definitely, there's still a lot of challenges there. To kind of talk about a little bit, I guess, of the facade, because I'm sure that's something that we should kind of discuss. As we kind of move the buildings closer, as you can see, the facade does look quite a bit different. We decided to move into more of what people call like an arts and crafts kind of architectural style, really kind of solidifying it with that gray base on the bottom. The reason we chose not to do stone was, one, because of cost. Like I said, the project still is not, the project is still tight. The construction budget's very tight. And we think that even just a small stone element is going to break it up. So what that gray band does is it actually solidifies kind of the base of the building, giving it kind of a platform to sit on. It's going to kind of reduce that overall look in terms of kind of the size. It's going to kind of maybe shrink that down a little bit as opposed to the verticality that we had in the last one. So we made that adjustment there. To also talk about that fire exit, just to kind of go over that. Obviously, like Warren said, the green space is a challenge on this project. My opinion and the opinion of our staff is we would prefer not to do it. Obviously, it would probably require some sort of pavers or something. I apologize. We got the packet on Friday. It was lobster night, so I did not have a ton of time to review this, but we have had a lot of meetings today to discuss it. But there would be some pavers required. As you guys can see on that site plan, that really is our only green space for children to play in. That would remove that space completely. We think this plan, just in terms of the way the fire trucks can line up and can kind of get around the building, we think that there's still plenty of room for fire trucks to maneuver around the buildings as well. And then I know the bufferage requirement came up again, and that should be in your packet. I believe the house next door is actually zoned business transitional district. I think it was something that came up last time that wouldn't require any sort of bufferage there. We do have some, if you go to the landscape plan, we do have some kind of bufferage. So it's actually a very steep slope. So we do have a Norway spruce there, which, that should provide some nice kind of coverage as well as a black spruce. And those are two really hardy plants. They grow pretty large in size, so they're going to get some coverage, and they're also going to be able to be really stable on that slope. And then up front there, that setback's really small, but we did get some trees in there. We actually got some prairie fire trees in there, which are just these really nice crabapple trees that bloom this really nice red pink color, kind of to signal, to kind of welcome people into that as well. So I'm sure, I don't know if Carl has any more comments or Ryan has anything to add as well. I'm sure Carl can talk a little bit more about the soils and some of the other things he saw. Or if you guys have any questions for us as well.
So I know everybody here, you got a computer in front of you.
You have to speak into the mic so people can hear you.
I will. If you could, just grab one of these and pass them along. So my name's Carl Sawyer. I'm the owner of Sawyer's Excavating. I was contacted by Swall Development. Well, actually, I started speaking with Arthur back when he originally purchased Buchan Trucking. My mechanic, Terry, had worked there since Buchan had come into existence here in East Troy. And when I found out they were tearing it down, I got a hold of Arthur and asked him if I could bid on the project. So that's how I came into contact with Swall. In the meantime, since I've met Kevin and Arthur and Ryan and worked with them, I've done a little research and back, checking on their company, and I've looked at some of their other developments, and I found them to be a very solid company. And I think, in my heart, I believe East Troy has a real good opportunity here with this development to do something meaningful with that property, which will help our community, in many different ways. One of the main things being is the income that we can generate through the taxes and revenues. The fact that the residents of this development are going to be able to walk up to the square and use our businesses. And it's just, if you take a look at the amenities that are offered by this development, they're pretty nice. Now, I'm not an architect and I sure can't design the inside of a room, so I don't really have much to say about the outside finishes. But what I do want to talk about today is this site itself, not the buildings, not anything else. I want to let East Troy, all the residents and all of you know what you're facing on this site and what we found. So that site used to be, years ago, it was, and John can correct me, I might be wrong, it was Robrand Farms, and it was Elmer's place. Now, they used to have the warehouse, which was the trucking shop. That used to be a warehouse. They had greenhouses on site, barns, the local fields were all owned by them, and they did all their vegetable farming. And then they used the shop to package up all their produce and ship it and send it to the various companies they were dealing with. Now, if you take a look at the maps I just gave you, the one that is a county picture from 1975. Now, Buchan purchased the property in 1980, 79, 80 roughly, I believe. And when they purchased the property, as I said previously, it was Robrand Farms. And if you look at that picture from 1975, I drew a line across there. That line is essentially the old ridge line on the property. And if you look, you'll see the property next door, which is Crucible Materials, Trent Tube, which is now the Cleanup Trust. You'll see there's an old retention pond back there. That retention pond was put in for the building that is currently right next door to this property, which is owned by Wisconsin Ovens. So over the years, if you look at where that old ridge line is, that's where I drew in the line with the X's. And if you lay that right across the other sheet, which is Swall's current development plan, what you're going to see is that fully, 30 to 40% of that property has been filled over the years. And you think, well, it's been filled for 40 years. That's enough time for settlage. Okay, great. Well, the problem is, what was it filled with? So East Troy had County Highway ES was resurfaced in approximately 82, 83, 84, somewhere in that time frame. Guess where all of ES through East Troy went? It went behind that line that I drew on that piece of paper right there. Okay? Basically, Buchan was very conscientious. Jake was a very good man, Jake and JB both, and miss them dearly, but they filled that property and they allowed the local contractors to bring in whatever kind of fill, they had available. They tried to keep the topsoil out. They made sure the fill was clean, but they allowed concrete. And one of the other things that went on in East Troy at the time is Robert Diamond had his concrete batch plant up the street. And every day his concrete trucks drove down behind Buchan and washed out in that hole back there. So when, Kevin says, and Ryan tell you that, hey, we ran into a little bit of rubble and some rocks. Well, let's talk about chunks of concrete that my excavator, which can lift 10 to 12,000 pounds without a problem, can't move. There's concrete in there to the point that it's not feasible for Sewall Development to put a basement back there. That's what has brought about this flip in the project. And I'm so adamant about this because the reason I'm trying to show you this on the map and the old pictures, I want everybody to understand how serious this is. Not only if you take a look at where the buildings are moved to, but now that forces all the utilities out into that area where all that concrete is. So every water line, every sewer line, the underground storm sewer, all of that is going to be placed in where this concrete is. You're not separating this concrete out and recrushing it like you would on a big project. There's simply not the room here, number one. And number two, it's mixed with dirt and fill and whatever else. I mean, it's all clean. There's no contaminated. We found a couple pieces of wood here and there, but for the most part, Buchans were conscientious about it being clean fill, other than the concrete. So, long and short, what I'm getting at, what I'm driving at here is this site is going to, whether it's Sewall Development does this site or another developer comes in here, I just need you all to be conscientious of the fact that if Sewall, who is trying very hard to get this done, does not, and they say they walk away from this project, then East Troy is going to be facing the next person that's going to come in and do the project. This is not a site where you're going to put a basement on that back half, 30 to 40% of that property. So that means you're in at-grade development and, structure above. And that limits what you're going to do with this site. So while we have this opportunity and we have a developer here that's willing to put the money into this and invest in our community, I think we need to really look carefully at what we're, when we're reviewing the plan. I understand we have to wear many hats. We want to make sure this is great for now, for the future, and for, making sure it's the right fit. But just make sure that you understand that because of the way this site is set and all this concrete that's in there and the extra cost that's going to be added to this, which they had no idea until I called Ryan and I begged him, please let me do some bore pits, because they're getting ready to send out their final documents for bid. And I said, you guys got to bore this. And they said, well, we did borings. And I said, no. I know what's there. I need to dig pits so you can see big holes and you can see what's there, not little bore holes. And that's where we found the concrete. So I just need everybody to be really understanding of what this site represents if we don't move forward here. Now, does that mean we should compromise? No, absolutely not. We want the best of all worlds. But just remember the flip side of this, too, is they're going to have to do a lot more investment here to make this project happen than what they initially thought. And that's what's caused this flip in this plan. And I just hope we don't take this as a opportunity to, take another swing at changing the whole project around on them and add more cost to it. So just be very cognizant of this. Just to follow up the bore holes, we did 3 in the old building plan. We did 3 holes in each building, and then we did 2 up where the center of the new buildings are going to go, or where they're proposed now. In all of those holes, we found concrete ranging anywhere from 3 feet below grade at a start. Some we had concrete as soon as we put the bucket in the ground, but it went down to as deep as 16 feet deep. So this is not something that is, it's just easily fixed. So I just want everybody aware of the difficulties of the site, and you really think through of what you're going to ask and require here. So that's all I have for you. Thank you.
Thanks, Carl.
Thanks for the drawings, too.
Yeah.
I don't know if all of you are aware, but if you get on Walworth County, they have the One View. I'm sure you've all used it. But it has a really nice a really nice section in there you can toggle over on the right side in there, and it has the base map and legends and historical maps and all the aerials for the entire county. A lot of the photos are very grainy, but it's, it really is a good resource to use. This map was from 1975. The reason I printed this one, it was probably about the best I could get out of the bunch. But if you take a minute and you look on there and look at this site and look through, you can see the development history of the property when you look at it. So, thank you.
Can I get a clarification from you before you sit down?
Sure.
So maybe I misunderstood something, but I'm getting conflicting reports here. You're saying that with the land right now, it pretty much has to be like this proposal. But when Kevin was talking, he said there's going to be issues either way, and it doesn't matter which way it goes.
There is. If you take and lay what I just gave you there, those two, you look at the line I drew in there, that's essentially the back or the bottom southern side of the L's there, okay? Actually, the L's of the buildings are going to fall into that, okay, into that concrete area. So there still is going to be a concrete issue in the buildings themselves. But the issue is now, before you were flipped, all your storm sewer, your water, your sanitary, all that main and utilities was placed in virgin ground. So you had no concrete to contend with. But 100% of your buildings was in concrete, in, filled area, okay? Now you have flipped it. You've put the buildings up where they're probably 80% in virgin ground, which makes putting the buildings in easier and less expensive. However, now your utilities are flipped into the back area, forced into that back area where they have to go through the concrete. And so there's, either way you did this site plan, there is great expense here that was not anticipated. But
And there's still stabilization of the parking lot as well, Carl.
yes,
And I didn't mean that we have the same issues. The issues are severely not severely, but they're mitigated with this new site plan. But the issues still persist. At the end of the day, it's still a bad site.
well, and yeah, sorry. To follow up even with that, with the parking lot, now we've put these boreholes in there with the excavator. Granted, they're not very big, but you start putting an 8 by 8 foot wide hole, and then you go down 12 feet, and now you're going to turn around, you flip this around, and you have to put, a parking lot in there. Well, now you have a differential in settlage. So that's going to be an issue that we're going to have to address. We may end up having to go back just to those boreholes, open them back up, and slurry pour them shut again to make them as stable as the ground around it. So this site is just, there's not really a good answer here. If you take away one thing here is, if you've got somebody that's here that they're willing to develop this and put the money towards it, please work with them, because I think if Sewall walked away from this, you're going to be looking for a long time before you find somebody to handle this, because of all the sites I've dealt with in my 23 years of doing excavation as my own company, let alone my 10 years before, I have not seen a site as bad as this. So, and just trying to make sure, I understand we want the best of everything, and as you said, you wear many hats here on this board, and I get it, but, just make sure you balance as judiciously as you can here. So I think we got a good thing. They're willing to move forward with it, so do your best.
Thanks, Carl. All right. Other questions from the commission?
I think Orrin in his original commentary said something about 2024 in February when this started. This started probably back in about 2019. Kevin, this is Scott Seeger. I don't know if you recognize the voice.
I do recognize you.
This has been a long time in the making. And I remember when we first walked that site, Art and Kevin and your mom as well, looking at this, understood that this was going to be a challenge. We knew that just the topography of what it was, the unknowns that were underneath that soil, and the village has done a lot to try and help in that process, trying to get it within a TID to try and help those processes and funding. With the original purchase of land, it was a much better deal than what anybody else probably would have been able to have go through. I know you did your due diligence and challenges with attorneys and acquiring the rest of the land that the village wasn't able to help you with. However, I think back to our original discussions and walking that property with you and your dad, and then stopping at the brewery afterward and just having conversations about how much you guys loved the community and the look of our square and how it was such a quaint, really cute place to be, and how you wanted to emulate the square and the unique buildings that were on the square with the buildings that you were putting up in this project. Now, I've been removed from village government for a little bit and come back to see a project that is not even close to what we had originally talked about. I understand that financial constraints and trying to make this project cash flow is extremely important. I know that there are aesthetic things that can be done to buildings that do not put them out of budget. And I don't see a single thing that's aesthetically pleasing about this building whatsoever. I think that the ask of some stone on the front of it is not an outrageous ask for what looks like just a box, and about the cheapest one you can put together, because not much character in this building at all. I know this because I've done this my whole life, building buildings and being involved in development. I hope that you can see in your budget somehow, Kevin, to find what we need as something that's aesthetically pleasing in this area. And a little bit of stone in the first floor area, I don't think is a big stretch on this one, especially knowing the background and what we've all talked about, knowing where the monies have tried to come through to help with this project. I'd hope that there'd be some kind of consideration of original commentary about what we wanted in this community and what you were trying to give us in your original sketches of what we were going to see, because I just don't see anything close to it here.
Kevin, I don't know if you want to address any of that.
Yeah. I mean, so I don't know if you saw the original building design, but we had a different building design. And then as we shifted it closer to the square, we decided to kind of match it up a little bit more with the colors, giving it that base, removing the verticality and going in a more horizontal direction. We also added kind of like a roof piece, a cornice piece on the top of those bump outs. I will tell you, it's very hard to make a 4-story building of this size that kind of matches some of those smaller buildings. And we worked with our architect on a lot of different iterations, and this is what we came up with. I honestly, Scott, I don't remember the original. I know what we were attempting to do. I feel like this is a lot closer to that design than anything we've shown before.
I think a big one, Kevin, that's missing on this is something we talked about 2 years ago and that was roof lines and showing some kind of pitch, not just some flat top building. And that's literally what the discussion was at the Planning Commission level, little over 2 years ago.
Do you mean adding a pitched roof?
I'm talking about some kind of accents of a pitch roof, a gable area, even a shed roof area on these buildings, just to give them some aesthetic appeal. Having this big box, that's rough, man. Compared to what we originally talked about, it's nothing close.
I mean, I'll be honest, Scott. This was kind of, I think this is the closest iteration of what we had. And like I said, I mean, we haven't had a lot of time to review this, but adding some of those elements could, I don't know, we wanted to go with something that's a simpler design, that kind of ties in between the modern aesthetic of what we had originally kind of thought that this project could look like, as well as a traditional aesthetic, and this is what we came up with.
Well, when I look through the plan here that you've given us, you've got some examples of buildings that are in our community and outside. Some of them we talk about Honey Creek Apartments. We really pushed them to do what we asked of a pitched roof, some kind of sloping roof angle on it. And they accommodated it and somehow found a way to get it within budget. You've got the one that's in Mukwonago. I know that they were pushing for the amount of stone that they have on that one and the pitched roof on that one. These are all, local buildings built within the, past couple of years that somehow found a way to figure out to make it within budget. I just, like I said, remember our original conversations, and I even remember originally meeting at the location in Sussex. And the aesthetic views that I saw there in that building, that was completely different than what we've got here.
But we did it in a different style. That was our goal. And to be fair, a lot of those buildings, there are 3 stories. And I know the original conversation that we had, this was when I first presented in February, is the reason we went with a flat roof instead of a pitched roof was specifically because it lowers the overall height of the building. There was concern about the height of the building, and that's what that document was meant to show, that the height of a 4-story building with a flat roof was comparable to the height of a 3-story building with a pitched roof.
Yeah, I understand that, Kevin, but I'm not asking for a completely pitched roof, but I'm asking for some kind of detail accents on this building to break it up a little bit. It is literally a box, and it doesn't look anything more than a box with that cornice molding that goes across the top. Because at 4 stories tall on that building, you won't even notice that cornice molding is there.
Go ahead.
I wasn't part of the original submittal. I can tell you, I'm sorry, Ryan Knopp, Vice President of Construction with SWAL. I wasn't part of the original submittal, so I'm kind of following this and kind of putting the pieces together from the backstory. I can tell you that the design that I saw before this one, this is a dramatic improvement, and we did that because we knew you were pushing these buildings closer to the street, they get a lot more attention, and needed a little bit of softening instead of such a modern look. So that's what we achieved with this. I understand we want to add pitched roofs. I'd love to, right? We won't be able to meet the height requirements. And add some masonry. But we understand that those things that you requested of other developments, they didn't necessarily have a site to contend with that we do. And we are still at a lot of risk of what's lies underneath. And so we're hoping, we have some numbers plugged to address those soils, but we are, again, those numbers could double in with 2 days worth of work by Carl telling us, how bad that is. And so we're trying to present an acceptable product here, but to add the stone, but again, it's adding, the principle is we're adding more money to the architect when we really need those dollars for what lies beneath, and the only way we can do that is to address that site. We did follow some rules of architecture. I know it doesn't have a lot of pizzazz, but, like Kevin mentioned, it does produce a foundation to the building to reduce that long vertical look. We stuck there, there's only so many colors you want to add to that, where stone would add another one. And stone, on a base level of a building of this magnitude, actually detracts from the building in a sense. When you have a 2, maybe 3-story, the stone accents will pop. They do get lost. And we did consult with, our architect. We did go through this and put a lot of thought in. If you notice things that we turned the black balconies, the harsh black to white. We had a lot of white tones to soften the building itself. There were other colors involved before. We reduced that. Again, trying to follow some basic architectural rules. So what we're trying to do is give as much of that as we can, still knowing we have to contend with unpredictable site at this point. And again, as we flip the buildings forward, yes, we're going to hopefully mitigate some of the foundation issues that we would encounter otherwise, but we still have that back half to contend with as far as utilities go, as far as the parking lot goes. And we do have some more borings that we took, so we have more information, but there's no way of really truly understanding what's below there. So we're kind of walking into this, hoping we can make this work, and we're going to give it a shot. But now what I'm hearing is, kind of somewhat of an outsider's, there's resistance, and there's this we don't like the building. Well, I mean, we're trying, I think, to do the best that we can here. And I thought this product, we were pretty excited about it, to be honest, versus the previous version, if you've seen that before. We thought we went into the right direction. And now it's at a point where I don't know if we can't, I mean, again, there's an opinion about the masonry. Again, according to our architectural rules, that would not help, and for the reasons I mentioned. We can add the picture, that it will add significant costs at this point, and we'd have to also, again, reinterpret the height of the building if we did introduce those elements. I can't speak to the buffering of the landscaping. It sounds like that's just more of a zoning issue, that's a misinterpretation, and we can do that. But again, in introducing the lane, the actual access point, I don't know that we had 2 access points before. The original plan has always shown 1 access point. There was a drive entrance into the lower half of one of the buildings, but I don't know if that was considered necessarily an access point.
So I guess I'm going to try to stake out a compromise here.
If I could chime in too, like those buildings and those pictures were built in an environment where interest rates were 3 to 4%, right? Like we're looking at interest rates now at between 6.5 and 7%. We're looking at a president-elect who, is threatening to deport a good chunk of what our labor force is, as well as create some pretty strong tariffs that are definitely going to affect this project.
So
you can look at these other projects and say, hey, they have.
Kevin, let me offer a compromise for you. Okay? So let's talk about just the building aesthetics piece. So 1, I do like the layout plan more. I appreciate the work that you did to soften it. I think some of the things I'm looking at a Google Street View of our more rectangular style buildings that are on the square, which includes one that was built in the past 10 years because the building was torn down, we built a new one. On all of these, there's 2 pieces of accents that I don't think that you have that would kind of soften this, but I don't think it would add a ton of cost. One is some accents at the top of the roof line there. So right now, you just got a stark line. So if you go out to Google or you go out and drive our square, take a look. This is on the north side of the square. There, you want to give me the architectural term?
Cornice moldings across the top.
Sorry?
Maybe cornice moldings across
Cornice
the top.
moldings at the top. And the windows themselves too have, even like on the brand new building, the windows themselves are rectangular, but the siding around them and the white is not exactly square. So I think if you made some minor aesthetic adjustments there, that would soften this to not come across as very modern, so modern as what you've got. I think the other thing is with this being closer to the road, I think that this gives a better visual, similar to what's on the square, where those are right next to the road as well, and then you've got your parking lot behind the building. I know we talked a lot about with the other layout plan, what was kind of your green space to kind of break up that visual for as people drive down Main Street. You don't have that with this layout. So I think those two things, I don't think that would add a lot of cost to what you're trying to do here. And it would start to fit in a little bit, you'd have some visual accents that would tie into what we already have on the square.
So, and I think Ryan can speak a little bit to what specifically the cornice piece is. And I know we do have some different trim that we looked at around the windows too, in terms of kind of breaking that up. So I think, Ryan, you can speak to that.
And Kevin, the other thing I want to talk about is I completely understand the repositioning the buildings and agree with the idea that it needs to happen. There's no way you could have built off that backside like you originally wanted to, with having that landscaping to be able to look across that area in the back. But the aesthetics of this building, this is one of the first times I've been privy to look at this in a while. I was a little shocked.
I'm not sure, Kevin, exactly which one you speak. We did add a cornice up on top. It's not, it's not elaborate. We didn't want it to steal the show, but it did soften some of those bump outs.
And it may not show here on this render, and maybe we just need a tighter
Okay, all right.
angle on it. I mean, again, this looks like I'm standing, 50, 100 feet away from it and looking up, and I get it's a four-story
Yeah.
building. But I'm telling you, like, if you just go to Google Maps, go to the Street View. This is from, I don't know, it looks like this year, maybe, or last year. And just go, Sost is the business that I searched for, because I knew that's in the building that was rebuilt on the square. You'll see all of the trim and cornice molding that I'm talking about.
Sure.
To try to tie this in. It has no, I shouldn't say no. I think on the, let's see, I'm trying to look at there's a little bit of stone, very little bit of stone facade on the bottom level. It's all siding up on the top. So I think that would give you a compromise, and would also, again, visually tie to the square, so that as you're driving down Main Street, it's like I look over, I see that, and I see that kind of stuff. Thank you. Yeah, so if you zoom in, the yellow building there is Sost. So you kind of see those accents there, and you see the trim on the windows is not entirely square. There's a bit of a pitch to the top.
It has more depth to it.
Yeah, and I think that's, my reaction was, I think you softened it, but it still felt a little too modern. And that's a modern building right there that was built just within the past 10 years.
I believe our original submittal didn't have any trim. We did introduce, and this is all LP siding trim. We introduced a trim around the windows and the outside corners, inside corners of the building. Again, our intent was try to soften. If you look at, I don't know if we have the old renderings, but regardless. So we try to do, and we can change that. We had a thicker header and smaller, like a 2-inch trim around the top, or a 4-inch on the bottom. We can play with that. Bringing it out, it does sit a little bit proud of the siding, so there's a little bit, but it's not to the extent that I'm seeing like on the blue building.
No, and I'm not, and again, all these buildings were built at different times.
Sure.
The buildings further to the west had significant remodeling and rework, and, at an extraordinary cost. There's a different owner who owns the blue building, and again, I was just trying to go, because that building that I'm pointing out was literally torn down, and that new one was built, and you wouldn't know that unless I told you that.
Right.
So visually, that owner matched the aesthetic of what was there, and I get you're not right next to it,
Right.
but you're just down the street from
Right.
it.
And again, that is, I get that, and you're probably right, I wouldn't even notice, but he's got 30 feet of cornice.
Yeah, so we're trying to pull up
contend
last.
with.
Yeah, so we're trying to pull up. I thought there were some pictures from our.
Yeah, there. And so around our windows, we do have trim. We introduced the white trim. We introduced the siding that goes in between them to kind of tie that together, give it a different element there. And then the ones that don't have that siding between them, it's a 2x2, right, Ryan? And then a 2x4, or is it 2x4?
It's
on top?
2 and 4 inch, yeah, 2 inch inside and.
Yeah, so
bottom,
it's
I think, 4 inch.
2 inch, yep, on the side, and then 4 inch trim on the top to
It's
kind of
LP,
give,
it's LP.
to break that up.
1 inch
Are
LP.
you talking about the top of the roof line?
I'm talking about around the windows right now. The roof line, we have a detail on the, I don't know if we have it in the submittal, but we can submit a detail of what that looks like and how, the extent of it, the size. But it's basically 2 bys built out on top and then some angled LP trim to achieve that cornice look, or cornice. I know, I'll first admit, it's not as extravagant as I'm seeing in the downtown in that rebuild by any means. But it was our attempt to introduce some type of cornice versus the previous submittal that didn't have any.
Yeah, I don't think that what we're proposing here, it would be a lot of cost for you, and I'm not looking for you to brick the whole side or anything like that. So I know we're just trying to pull up the April packet.
I'm looking for it too.
So while we try to pull that up, one other thing I had a question about, and just kind of so honestly, I'd like to have a conversation more with staff about this access point that they're asking for. I don't know if they're talking, because that didn't come from the fire chief, that came from our village engineer and director of public works. So I don't know if they're thinking about for maintenance vehicle access, because that is where your water and sewer utilities are coming through, and, so I think that we need to have a separate conversation. I don't know if you had a detailed conversation, Orrin.
It was regarding emergency vehicle access. The conversation was, should something happen, an accident at the driveway, there's a lot of people, obviously, that reside here, and it would be nice to have a secondary point to get an ambulance in or a fire truck if needed, and that it would be restricted to just that because it wouldn't be needed otherwise. It would just be for that emergency situation. And that's where the conversation around removable bollards or something that would cordon it off when it's not being used came into play. There wasn't really any concern regarding maintenance vehicles to that effect. It was really more towards emergency vehicles. And the fire chief did take a look at it as well. I was just going to bring up his email so I didn't misquote him. He's basically saying he agrees that it would be a great asset to us if they had it to deal with building 2. So that's different than saying he has to have it, right? But he's saying that if he did have it, it would be helpful. So
there's that, and so there's that. So up on the screen is, I think, the color rendering of the prior version where we had the black. So I agree that what you've got is much more softened. I think another option, if you could go back to Google Maps for a minute, Eileen, just to give you guys another visual. Can you spin around? Keep going. Go over to Jim Taylor. Drive it. Oh, and we changed time periods apparently, because, we're changing time. Oh, this is, there you go. Yeah, there we go. So this is one of our construction.
Go back a little bit further, look at the side of the building.
You want me to reverse it?
Revert back up. Beep, beep.
Wrong way.
There
Yeah,
you
you
go.
guys don't want to drive.
So that's before it was a brewery, yeah.
You got a longer run.
Can I get closer?
Yeah, you can right there. There you go.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
One more click? No.
Oh, that goes away.
so that's what it all used to look like before people put a bunch of money into it. So.
If you
but-
keep going, it eventually changes into that.
Yeah, if you go back, there you go.
Google Maps is really.
That's
long.
good enough.
So Kevin, when
There we
I'm
go.
talking
Yep.
about changes to the building, I'm talking about easy, simple solutions to soften it. If you look what Jim Taylor did to this building, and especially if we could have seen the side of it, it shows more vertical lines, breaking up colors slightly. You wouldn't have to change cost. All you're doing is changing color and maybe adding a couple more trim boards. He was very creative in making this building look aesthetically right for the community. And really the side of the building kind of, not even this one, the other side of it does a better job. But anyhow, doing a couple more trim boards is what I'm talking about. Breaking up the facade to make it look even better, make it look like that unique building that it should be. And this is what we were talking about when we
So-
originally sat down and looked at this thing, about the aesthetics of this community and how nice it would be to match what we have in our square. And we're doing simple trim boards and little things over a window, 5-pond product that's cheap to throw into the building to make it look different.
And I think a lot of that doesn't come across in the rendering, to be fair, because we do have a larger trim board that we're now putting around the base of the building to kind of help anchor that building. We did add more trim to go around that window, and we took it's almost similar to what he did there. We just added kind of that white trim to break it up in the middle there. We do have trim that goes around the side of the bump outs.
So Kevin,
There is a
yeah, so Kevin, I think that it's difficult for us to see in the rendering. So as we were talking about earlier,
Yeah.
maybe what you just need to give us is a zoomed in view of, I'm just going to pick one part here, the red here with the 3 vertical windows, give us a zoom in on what that would look like, with that roof line and that set of windows and kind of what you're talking about. I think that would go a long way to help us understand that, because I get it. Like when you push the button and hit render and then you convert it to a PDF and
Yeah.
you put it in a packet and we're trying to zoom in and it's like, what? But I think it's really important for us now on this, and I know this seems like nitpicking, and we don't want to add a bunch of costs to your project at all. We just want to make it fit aesthetically, and if it's going to be right there at the road, that's why it's really important for us.
From what I just
No,
saw,
I
the
get
last
you
one
on
you
that.
brought to the board, the planning commission, to what it is now, it is different, and it's much better, and it's in the right direction. Just a couple little things, man. It would not add a ton of cost, and it would definitely change the look of it.
So Kevin, so I'm going to go away from the building aesthetics for just a minute. I was just looking at the layout, and Carl passed out a printed copy. This is in the packet. I did have a bit of a concern with where the dog park ended up, just because it's diagonal behind a residence there. And I know you've got some fencing there, but I'm just a little worried about noise and breaking that up. I just, if a bunch of people are out there at 7 a.m. with their dogs on a Saturday, I don't want to disturb those people.
I think for me, that was really the only spot we could put it in. If you do go to the landscape plan, that is one of the areas where we put, let me check real quick if that was in Norway's. I think it was in Norway spruce. Where that was a Norway spruce that we put there. So we do have some trees around there just to kind of provide some sort of coverage. And then we did try to push it as far away from the house as possible as well. I don't see any other spot we could potentially put it. That's kind of the issue I was running into with this new site plan.
I hear you. I'm just looking here. You've got that, and I appreciate you putting in the trail easement that we talked about to the public trail. I wonder if you just had the trail go through where the dog park is and just moved it around just a bit, you could get a little bit more room there from a dog park perspective and kind of separate it more from that house.
That or you could possibly switch to the maintenance building with the dog park as well.
Yeah.
That still gives you the square footage you
Yeah,
need.
that would be another option too.
And maybe we could work the trail around it a little differently. I that's not something, obviously, yeah, that's something that I would have to take a look at.
I just know to be honest, when we formed the TID, we talked about sidewalk construction and, connecting this property with the square, and that's obviously our intention. And,
Yeah.
But, some of the property owners there were like, oh, great, now I got a sidewalk to shovel.
Yeah.
So I think just respecting that, we're imposing a bit on these property owners, like the more that we could find an alternative, I just don't want a bunch of barking dogs right behind their house.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good idea. That might be something that we're able to do, just kind of maybe shift that dog park further down, and then kind of loop that sidewalk around. Like I said, I can't promise that that's something that's achievable, but it's definitely something that we could take a look at.
Yeah, or possibly, like Scott suggested, swap where the dog park is, where the maintenance building is. So I think that I would prefer Scott's option over mine, but if that won't work, then I think you could go to mine as number 2.
Yeah, that's another one where we'd have to take a look at the grades back there, and then just square footage. I don't know if we'd be able to get the same square footage over there, but it's definitely something we'll have our civil engineer take a look at for sure.
Other questions? Go ahead, Roger.
So I just want to go back to the beginning. I agree with Scott and everything that he said. I think it'd be one thing if this building was built as proposed in the back part of it. That's what I was kind of sold at that time, where there was that buffer area where we wouldn't really see the buildings too much. But now that it's being pushed right next to the road, I think we have to be very, very careful about the look of it and the aesthetics of it and the dog park and all that stuff. I think this is I don't want to say a completely new plan, but it's a lot different than it was.
So I think what I'd like to propose is, Kevin, is this something that you guys could get back to us for the next Plan Commission meeting? So we see some of those details?
Yeah, we could bring some of those details in.
Okay. So we'll just hold this over until the next Plan Commission meeting?
Can I just ask one more thing? So I think at the last meeting, we asked for also a traffic study for this area. I don't know if that ever happened or not.
It did.
Yeah, it was completed. I know from like load wise, there wasn't any additional concerns. There were a few concerns in terms of, or not concerns, I should say, but there are a few modifications that would have needed to be made. It's actually the reason we ended up, the recommendation was we ended up moving to one drive instead of moving that other drive that was coming into the underground parking. We got rid of that, brought everything through the center there. So at the end of it, that kind of was their original recommendation, was just having that one drive into the area. And so now we've actually consulted them again just to consult about not traffic load, because we know that obviously that road can handle the traffic load, but just for any potential improvements, turn in lanes and things like that with the new plan.
Yeah, and just to refresh the Plan Commission's memory, as far as that approval, that was to be reviewed by staff, but I certainly can provide that at the next meeting. If we're going to be coming back, we can provide that. I don't know if you'll have your updates, Kevin, because Kevin had asked if he needed to redo that. And I said, well, the traffic impact is no different. The traffic counts are no different. So it's really just looking at that intersection configuration to make sure if there's any adjustments that they would recommend that we're incorporating those into the plan.
And Kevin, one other thing too, and understand cost. Maybe maybe in reducing the cost, we're looking at having a couple added details to the building facade. If it was just to be street side facing, that would minimize the cost, leaving the parking lot side as presented tonight. I think that would help with your cost as well, but it definitely would address what we're looking at as an issue of being that much closer to the roadside, needing it to just be aesthetically a little bit more pleasing.
I also do want to iterate. I think there's a lot of what you guys are looking at is there in the actual plans. It's just maybe not emphasized in the rendering. And it may require an additional rendering or another rendering just to kind of maybe enhance and show those details a little bit better.
Yeah, and if so, that's great, and if we could get that,
Yeah.
if that's there, we could, staff could send that out to the commission here, and if we had, other thoughts or feedback, we could try to get that to you before we meet again. That way we don't drag this out, because that's not what we want to do. We're not trying to be difficult. And then, but like I said, I would take a look at what that looks like zoomed in on whatever that render is, and compare it against some of the examples that we showed tonight. And then if you want to make some adjustments, then make those adjustments.
Okay.
Okay? And appreciate, Carl, you coming down, giving us the history of the property. We now know, don't dump concrete, on our properties that we want to develop, so. Yeah, so if you find any, time capsules or anything in there, let us know, buried in that concrete. Any other questions or comments for, yeah, go ahead.
Are we in agreement about the buffering? That's just a zoning misunderstanding, that it's not required?
I am. I did look into that after my conversation with Kevin, and it appears that if you look at our chart, there is no specific requirement for buffering the MR10, which is the base zoning for this plan development, from an adjacent central business transition district zoning. I would just say that so it's not required per code. There's no prescription for a specific percent opacity or anything like that in this situation. But that central business transition district property does have residents on it, so we do need to think about them, which we are. Matt, you referenced the dog park in relation to that. So, would adding trees, especially if there's grade issues over there, be much of a buffer? Not from the building, potentially from traffic coming in and out. Again, I don't know the slopes over there because I haven't seen an updated version of the grading plan associated with these new plans that have been submitted. And so I guess I'll defer to Kevin and his team as far as what they can potentially do to add something in that vicinity, but it wouldn't have to meet the requirements. So the condition pertaining to that, which is a carryover from the previous approval, could be removed and struck.
Yeah, I think that, to Oren's comments about trying to buffer the height of the height of the building, yeah, that's not
That's not gonna happen.
Yeah, not going to happen. Okay, but I think a little bit of buffering there because of the traffic, and that is the one entrance and exit from the property, I think is important. So for that residence, and, in the future, if that residence, is sold and becomes something else, then fine. I don't think you've got to do anything, gigantic here, but, it could be a row of arborvitae that, you just have there that's to visually break it up and kind of deaden some of that sound.
And just a couple of bushes just to stop the headlights from shining in their
Exactly.
windows as they're turning into the residence. Yeah.
Right.
Maybe able to add another spruce or two as well in that area. That probably would give us the best kind of bufferage. So those get pretty large too.
Okay. Gentlemen, thank you for coming back. Thanks for the discussion. I appreciate it.
Matt, before we end, can the Plan Commission give some feedback regarding the idea of that emergency access? Is that, because that will ripple through quite a few things. So if the developer's bringing back revised plans, I think they'll need some direction as to whether or not they should look into that with what they're preparing for next meeting.
So the proposal was, could you scroll up a little bit, Eileen? The proposal, go back. Yeah, the proposal was for that little path there by the pool. Is that what they were talking about?
There's actually an easement on the east side of that would come in for the water main. Kind of in between the building and then out to the street. And so it would be in that area, yeah.
I guess so we're talking about this from an emergency standpoint, and you talked about wanting, would you then have to put hardscaping in there? Is that, I'm out of my area of expertise here, but
Yeah,
if
so
you're in an
that-
emergency, does it really need to be hardscaped?
It needs to be able to accommodate the weight of the vehicles and year-round, yeah. So if there's a situation where the ground's wet, obviously then if it's just grass, turf grass, that could be a sticking point.
You gotta clear it in the wintertime.
It would have to be cleared in the wintertime. So the main issue, like I pointed out, is regarding green space. It's already tight as it is, and so there would
Where's
be a
the
balance.
hydrant back there? Is there a hydrant that's going to be put in back there?
Eileen, if we can bring up the fire truck movement exhibit, that shows the fire hydrant locations.
Is it on this one, Carl? The color? Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of question the access point. If you have it for, egress as far as the movement of vehicles coming in and out of the building, that completely makes sense to me. We're talking about an absolute anomaly where you have an accident in front of that access point and you have a fire in the building at the same time. That's why we need to put another road access in? That seems a little bit of a stretch to me.
I think-
Especially having the hydrants behind there already. You run some hoses back if you have
Well,
to.
that's my point, is that like the hydrants are on the backside away from the road. So, I'm also worried about the idea of putting out bollards, which are going to have a padlock or have to be raised and lowered and, all those things. And, oh my God, the building's on fire. Oh, wait, let me remember to go grab the keys and let me take, 3 or 4 bollards out. I just don't see that this is a thing that somebody's going to remember to go do. And they're not going to drive the truck through it. So I'd almost just rather say, if it's that big of an emergency, tear through the fence and go through it. Maybe you have a gate there that they could go through. I don't.
The issue that I foresaw too is that's kind of right where our landscaping is going to be. So that area would potentially remove any landscaping as well. So I think we had that bed that was going to shift over to that area. If you go to the landscape plan, it's a little off, but we shifted the sidewalk over. So we were going to shift that bed over as well, so we could run the sidewalk kind of more along the building. It kind of cuts kind of right in the middle of our screenage of the pool from the road in a lot of ways. There's still ways to do it.
I almost would see it would be more appropriate to try to also put in a fire hydrant on the backside of your second building here, and they park the fire truck next to on the adjacent property there. And that would give them easier access to the backside. I guess I don't want to give direction here. I'd like you all as staff to talk with Joe and Jason and Tim about what are they thinking here? Because their suggestion here is confusing to me. It sounds like to Scott and maybe others.
So did the fire chief said he wanted something there? Or not?
I guess the way you tell me if I'm wrong in this interpretation. He didn't ask for it. Jason and Tim Lynch said, oh, we should consider this. And he said, oh, it would be an asset. You know, he's not going to turn down access.
Correct.
I think let's revisit that with staff here. I think if we ultimately decide to put something there, I think we'll have to make an exception on green space percentages because that's not going to be feasible.
Just one more comment regarding that. That area where the pool, that's where our clubhouse is, Jason, in the building there. That is a gathering spot. It's a community space. There's going to be grills. There's going to be a fire pit, things like that. I'm just putting on the scenario of, let's say we have a fire in the garage, maintenance garage down the corner, and for whatever reason, they decided to bring the emergency vehicles on that secondary path for whatever reason. We have essentially a fire that's a gathering spot for everybody to come out and go, what's going on? And now we have vehicles interacting with that. So for that reason, it's almost a liability to put that lane in that location. Again, there's also, we can run all different types of scenarios, but that would be one where we're introducing the vehicles with what would be a general gathering for the both buildings in that community, or the public.
Yeah, let's just get some more feedback from staff. I'm not sure, like, if it didn't come through the fire chief originally, I'm not inclined to think it's that urgent, but I could be wrong. Okay.
Somebody has a heart attack.
Well, again, I mean, for years, though, we also had tankers that could not get to properties out by Lake Beulah, and now we do. So, there are alternatives always. Yeah, exactly. Other comments, questions? All right, thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate it. We'll
Thank you.
talk to you on the 10th. All right, last item, item 3, discussion related to two-family residential planned use category from the village's comprehensive master plan. You see the memo here from Orrin, and we have a conflict and a requested, I guess, or the beginnings of the request of a rezoning where this conflict's going to come into play.
Sorry, Matt?
We have a request for a rezoning that will, I guess, eventually come before us, but can't come before us until we resolve this conflict. So, Orrin, I guess, anything else you want to highlight?
Yeah, this came up with a property near the square that is a single-family residential property. They have a back lot area, yard larger than normal for the neighborhood. Their thought was, could we rezone this to something that would allow it to be split? And the answer is it's a 10,000-ish square foot lot. If it was TR8, that allows 5,000 square foot lots. The TR8 is the two-family zoning district in the village. And I included the standards that kind of explain what the intent of that district is in the materials for this item. The issue is every time you do a rezoning, it needs to be consistent with your comp plan per state statute. The comprehensive master plan for the areas around the downtown has a land use, for most of them, of single-family, urban, sewered development. Some of them are a different district that allows multiple different types of residential, but primarily it's that single-family. And so what I'm trying to point out in the memo is just that you have a zoning that allows two-family and also single-family, but you have a land use that only really references single-family. There's a little bit of wiggle room there in the way that it's worded, but, because I think, as a planner, you always have to look at, is there gray area? there's not enough for me to be comfortable with in the way it's written right now, that's what it was intended. If you look deeper at some of the, from the original comp plan, some of the specific standards that were later, or policy items that were put forward regarding two-family, they're really all centered on limiting it. And what the direction that I would like from the Plan Commission is, A, has this come up before? You know, has this, in your guys' experience in doing rezonings and comprehensive planning in the community, has this thing come up? Is there a world where the village would be amenable to being more permissive to two-family than what the comp plan currently is? Essentially, there isn't a mapped two-family. In some communities, all of these duplex lots would have a matching land use of two-family that allows two-family. In this case, the comp plan says the two-family district isn't mapped. It's part of the planned neighborhood district, and there's a certain percentage of a planned neighborhood that would be allowed to be two-family, and that's only in certain areas where that's planned. One of them being kind of the northwest area, which is currently the town. So if the village is of the mind that it would be okay to be more permissive towards two-family, there's ways of incorporating that into your land use portion of your comprehensive plan. And there's varying degrees of how permissive do you want to be? And I can bring examples of that. In my world, the trends, the buzzwords would be missing middle housing. That's one of them. There are ways to make your zoning more friendly to things like missing middle housing, and the sweet spot for missing middle housing is actually fourplexes from some of the professionals that I've heard speak about it. We have districts that allow things like that other than the TR8. So just, again, this mainly pertains to this two-family and the zoning and the land use for that. You know, would there be certain language that we could tweak in the single-family urban land use description that would acknowledge that how just that two-family is allowed and under what circumstances, or something to that effect? That's kind of some of the thoughts that I just wanted to bring to the table.
So the TR8 and the 5,000 square foot, wasn't that more along the lines of the tiny home scenario?
Not necessarily. It might have been the intent. I guess it doesn't expressly state that that's what it's for, I think.
Well, the other thing that we did, and like I said, it took a little break for a while, so maybe things have changed, but we did do some work on making sure that we could make a combination of multi-housing, duplexes with single-family residents, especially on corner lots where it seemed like it was a feasible way to accommodate the needs of having multi-housing. If this is something similar to that kind of scenario, haven't we already covered it?
I think there is, in the 10-year update that was done, a nod to that, yes. But I don't know that these other things from the previous original comp plan had been removed. So that's kind of still there, even though you have the added layer of that from the most recent update that was done, yes. So you're correct, that there is that note in there. So one of the things, so you have the comment that maybe it would be acceptable for infill development to have duplexes on corners. That's true. One of the things that's in there, though, from going back to 2009, is that generally limit duplex zoning to no more than 3 consecutive adjacent lots and not more than 1 lot out of 12 in most neighborhoods. However, this may increase when intended as a transition to higher intensity uses such as highway or commercial properties. So just that statement right there is saying that they don't want, the intent was not to have a bunch of duplexes all in a row and congregated in one area to kind of have them more dispersed. I think if you look at there's percentages of what land uses make up the village at that time during that 2009 snapshot, and two-family was very low. So if you look at the overall housing mix for the whole village, it's not a large percentage. Duplexes don't make up a large percentage. Now, that could be different to a degree now, because that was a snapshot from 2009, that was a while ago. I'm just wondering if the village's sentiment towards these limitations is still at the same place, or if there's, a different sentiment towards two-family overall today.
So I want to give a little context to this, I guess. The request that's coming in is a property that is directly adjacent to a lot of properties that are already zoned TR8. So it's close to the downtown square. We actually, if you look at the zoning map here, this darker yellow-orange color, that's all TR8 zoning. But in the comp plan, the underlying zoning district is SR4, which is confusing because we have it zoned to allow TR8. So in your higher density areas of the village, we already have the TR8 zoning that exists. But now we have a property owner who's directly adjacent to a TR8 zoning district, and they have a 10,000 square foot property. They want to divide it, which I'm seeing a lot of requests come in like this lately. And most of them we can't do because of existing buildings on properties. So we're seeing a lot of properties where it may be zoned TR8. And they might say, hey, we want to split this into two separate properties. And probably because of the housing market, we're seeing these requests. Some of the issues, though, is they can't meet setback requirements because they already have two buildings on the property, and they just won't, there's no way they can configure it. So that's kind of a side note. But this particular property is directly adjacent to the TR8 zoning district. They approached us and said, hey, we really want to divide this property and make it another developable parcel. But the underlying zoning, or land use, I should say, in the comp plan is SR4. So they cannot rezone it to TR8, even though they're directly adjacent to TR8 districts. So that's where this really came into play, because I went to Orrin and I'm like, I'm looking at this comp plan and it doesn't even make sense to me. Because the comp plan shows, as he said, TR8 zoning exists in these neighborhood, what is it called again? Neighborhood?
The two-family land use is not a mapped land use. It is part of the planned neighborhood land use, which is for these
Thank you.
future areas that are farm fields now that could be a planned neighborhood later at some point in the future. And that the two-family would be a certain percentage of that. And so it's not acknowledging doing more of it. There is a note, one of the policies does acknowledge infill development, and that could be an opportunity, which is what we're talking about. But it's kind of contrary to the other part, which is saying not so many in a row on one side of the street, or 1 in 12 for a neighborhood. I mean, you have situations that exist where there's several duplexes in a row on the same street in the village currently. That's not unusual.
I think given when this was written, you talked about 2009, the situation in the village was different. I mean, that's, 16 years ago? So we got a different housing market. We've talked about housing needs. I'm not sure TR8 is the right zoning for that. I think it's a little broader than what we're talking about here, and I think what you're highlighting is the appropriate zoning. A duplex-type zoning isn't really written out, so we need to resolve that conflict, if I'm hearing that correctly.
Yeah, I think the zoning's clear. I think the TR8 zoning is allowing both two-family, but it also it's a two-family district, but it also allows single-family. You could have a single-family home in the TR8.
Yeah, but you've got a conflict with the map.
On the land use side, yeah. So it would make sense to have a two-family district that also allows single-family as well, same as you have a two-family zoning that allows single-family.
Yeah, and I think it's appropriate for, in this area, the higher density, we would not be, putting this out with our single-family requirements out in like the Belinsky subdivision that's being built out there. We wouldn't want to allow that.
Right. Yeah, this is in the urban, already built-out areas of the existing neighborhoods. We would be talking about primarily infill stuff.
This one in particular, and it doesn't need to, I'm just asking of curiosity on this one. Does it meet the requirements that it's maybe a corner situation? It has separate access to driveway and things of that sort?
In this instance, one of the house approaches one street, and this other developable area would be on another street, yes.
I believe that language, though, pertained to when we were approving plats, correct? Or it wouldn't allow us to just allow it on a property that's zoned SR4 currently.
Oh, you're talking about the discussion we had about the
Yeah,
corner
when
lots
you're,
within a
what you're
single family?
talking about,
Right,
I think
right.
that was more like if we're reviewing plats, we were going to encourage that to occur, to accommodate that. But I don't think we could just randomly go in the village and say, well, it's a corner lot, we're going to allow that, even though it's not zoned correctly for it.
So it does say allow duplex units on corner lots when specifically incorporated into a subdivision project.
I think because it's about as clear as mud, maybe, I think if you gave us some suggestions based upon your experience and let us kind of pick at that, I appreciate you highlighting, that we got a conflict here. What I want to be, I'm trying to strike the balance of, I think we want to be a bit more permissive in this more denser area and to try to address some of the housing shortages that you mentioned, but also then don't want somebody to take that and then go, oh, well, now I can try to squeeze a quadplex into something that's, really crammed in. We end up with another parking discussion and, things like that.
Yep, I think that's exactly the direction I was looking for. Thank you.
All right. With that, I think we're to recommendations for future agenda items. I think our next agenda is pretty full with a lot of what we talked about tonight. And then I think looking at tiny homes as accessory uses and residential zoning districts will be our next thing. Unless there's a more pressing topic from anyone. Okay. Our next meeting will be February 10th. It is needed at 6:30. And I will make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned. Thank you all. Can you turn off your mics, please?